Welcome all. Coleman Certified SBA Loan Training Office Hours, Thursday, July 28th edition. Week 4 has been complete, Lance, and SBA 1.
Absolutely. They should have had the opportunity this week to see a PLP loan put into SBA 1, and hopefully, and there have been some good questions this week about some things that various lenders wanted to do and putting a loan in SBA 1, and I've provided responses, but it's been a good week.
We're going to do a tease for August 11th. Lance will be in the house here in Southern California. I don't know why you want to get out of Arkansas in the middle of August, Lance.
It's hard to say, Bob, but I think Southern California is where I want to be in August.
We appreciate your questions during the week. As always, you can ask them also during this webinar, office hours session. Let's go to the poll questions. Is your institution reporting credit on your SBA loans? I'm assuming you're talking about payment status to the credit agencies, correct, Lance?
That's correct. Of course, you know, I want people to answer this honestly because it's something that SBA is now requiring. You don't have to report on the guarantors. You have to report on the business entities and their payment history, but it's not as easy as anticipated. And for those who answered no, you know, it's something that you need to start walking through. I don't think SBA is going to drop a magic anvil on you because you're not doing it, but I think it's something you need to start working for getting in place as soon as possible.
Absolutely. 50% said yes, 43% said no. I agree with Lance. For those of you who have answered no, get it done. It's got to be done.
Part of the reason SBA wants us to do this is because it supports the analysis of it. SBA loan, when it's put into SBA 1, it does a business credit score, and if SBA lenders are in fact reporting credit on their SBA loans, there's going to be a more robust database
for those of you who answer no, we will. There's a procedural notice that we will send out to you. We have the list of attendees. We'll get that out. We make a note, guys. We'll get that out to them. Number 2, when using SBA 1, do you use the forms created for SBA loan closings? Yes or no?
Well, and part of the reason I asked this question is to get an opportunity to encourage you to do so, because primarily for SBA Express and PLP loans, if you're processing those in SBA 1, it'll generate the note, the guarantees, the security agreement, and the various SBA forms that you could use in a quality closing. Now, again, remember, you can still use your own bank forms. That's part of being a delegated lender for most of these documents, but our stance at my bank is if the SBA note is something that SBA likes to see in other SBA loans, why don't we just do it on all of them? And if SBA 1 creates a compliant note on the SBA form, why not use it?
57% say yes, 43% say no. Question number 3, how many small lender advantage loans are you doing in a normal SBA lending month? None, 1 to 5, more than 5.
Hey, Bob, what about those mad typing skills I exhibited on this particular question? Lending became leadening.
And, of course, we picked it up at our end. So,
you know, Bob,
there's enough love to spread around.
Joseph, you know, Joseph assumes that I can always type.
29% say none, 71% 1 to 5. Nobody has more than 5. Lance, why are you asking this question?
Well, we did get a question from one of our participants about an SLA loan, and one of the challenges is you do have to check a credit score, and I think that's one of the questions we'll talk about in a little bit, but I was just curious how many people were actually doing SLA loans.
I got this question from someone, so I decided to put it out to the attendees at today's office hours. How long did it take to process your last GP 7A loan through Citrus Heights? Less than 1 week, 1 to 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, over 4 weeks.
Bob, I'll share my experience.
Please.
2 to 3 weeks.
Okay.
But Bob, it was an SBA 1 submission.
Lance, you're not following the script. We have a script, which is the next question. Anyway, the answers are 33% are 2 to 3 weeks, and 67% are over 4 weeks, which is what I would expect. Let's go to the next question, which Lance has already given his answer. How long did it take to process your last GP loan via SBA 1 at Citrus Heights? Lance has weighed in at 2 to 3 weeks.
And Bob, the previous question, those who indicated over 4 weeks, as a result of SBA saying we have to use SBA 1 for submission of GP loans, that time should improve.
We'll see. Look at that. 100% of you say 2 to 3 weeks. Lance, has that been your experience the last 3 to 4 months?
I believe that an SBA 1 GP submission, unless you just have some real challenges, Bob, I did have a SBA 1 loan that I did, and this is a little underwriting fact. If you have a business that someone has acquired and they have a general manager who's not involved in ownership but is the primary operator in the business, you actually have to do a 1919 on that key employee. And I had a key employee I had to do a 912 on, and that one took a little more than 2 to 3 weeks. Every other GP loan that I've done in SBA 1 has either been 2 or 3 weeks.
Lance, did you require a personal guarantee on that key employee?
No.
Okay.
No, but you do have to go through the process of CAVERS.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do the 1919. If they answer one of the first 3 questions with the appropriate answer that requires a 912, you have to do that. But you have to go through that process, but I did not have to require a guarantee.
But the point I also want to make, but you have the right to require a guarantee if you feel that's important, correct, Lance?
Oh, yes. That's one of the things, Bob. I'm putting together a new certification series for express lending as we speak. And it's one of the things that I'm looking at in that piece, talking about who has to guarantee an express loan and what happens when you have no guarantors at the 20% mark. You know, the SOP clearly, 5010-5H clearly states it doesn't matter if nobody owns 20%. Somebody has to guarantee the loan.
Someone needs to step up. Email question from Linda. Can you give us an example of how to enter a loan, this is SBA 1 question, so that the authorization prints correctly with these terms? Loan request $500,000, loan term 15.5 years, fixed rate 6% for 5 years. Then we adjust it to Wall Street Journal Prime at 275 every calendar quarter. The first payment is due 6 months from the note date. No principal and no interest for the first 6 months. Construction. How do we do that, Lance?
Well, it's going to be done in the terms and conditions phase of SBA 1. And on this particular question, I actually took those particular sections of SBA 1 and put this information in and sent a print screen back to Linda. You can put a loan like this in. I will say this. This is an interesting term, and it does create a few additional challenges in SBA 1, but it can be accomplished in the terms and conditions. In the second part of terms and conditions, you select when the first payment will occur. And in this particular instance, you're just going to select 6 months after the note date. And because it's a principal and interest payment starting 6 months after the note date, those principal and interest payments would start in the 7th month. The interest rate requires, when you click on the type of interest rate, there's fixed, variable, and then there's several other selections that you can make. This would have been simpler, Bob, if it were a fixed rate for 5 years and then floating annually after that. But floating quarterly, you can do that. Again, it's on that initial page in terms and conditions where you select the interest rate, and it does offer you half a dozen or more options for putting in your interest rate.
I would be careful about these exotic structures. I believe it will be detrimental when you take this loan to the secondary market. You will be hit with a discount because of the unusual structures. So
And I had this conversation, guys, I had this conversation with Bob on the phone yesterday. One of the challenges you run in, I like to see banks try to structure their loans in a way that they are available to sell in the secondary market. So, they don't all have to be. Here's the other interesting thing. I had a long talk with somebody at an investor who buys loans, SBA loans in the secondary market. They like quarterly adjust better than monthly, which I have no clue why that's the case, but you'll note that a quarterly adjust gets a slightly higher premium than a monthly. But these exotic interest rates absolutely are loans that you're going to keep in the portfolio.
How will we get a liquid credit score when we must enter every loan into SBA 1? Will we use the old E-Tran origination just for scoring new borrowers, or will SBA 1 give us the option or the ability to obtain that liquid credit score, Lance?
Well, that's a question, Bob, that I've elevated to Washington for a response, and I'm still waiting. My initial response is you're going to have to put it in E-Tran to get the liquid credit score, but the problem with that is if you put it in E-Tran and then you go over and put the loan into SBA 1, I'm not real sure. I've not done that. I'm not real sure how it's going to react. So for this question, Linda, I've elevated that question to Washington for a response, and we'll share it when I get it.
I assume at some point in the future you will have that ability from SBA 1. It is simply not functional now. That would be my guess. We have a question from Kathy. Can you get a credit score on a small lending advantage loan in SBA 1? The answer?
I talked to Coleman. You're still going to have to get the credit score in E-Tran.
Jessica, it would be nice if this was broken up because I can't read this, guys. You need to break these up on individual slides. So, is there a set date when and if I can't read it, I assume you can't read it. Is there a set date when SBA will stop reviewing franchise agreement submissions entirely, or just stop reviewing for excessive control of eligibility? Lance?
Well, I think the answer is yes. I think that as SBA implements some of the new processing of franchises, I think there's going to be a date where we're going to have a list to work from, and that's what we're going to use for eligibility on a franchise.
I'm going to pass. I'm going to pass on this slide. Everyone, SBA came out with this morning more clarification on the affiliation and franchise rules. I will touch on that briefly. It is in a PDF in your chat box. If you want to just Google it or send an email to me, we'll be happy to get it for you. And this came out this morning. And it clarifies some items. It talks about affiliation with respect to control. It also says, and this is probably the most important change, that now if you have a franchise affiliation, you no longer need to get that affiliated franchise signed off on by SBA. They're only concerned about the franchise agreement for the SBA loan in process. Did I say that correctly?
I think you did, yes.
Anyway, so the takeaway is now that we have all these affiliations, first of all, it defines affiliation simply control. And they got away with a lot of the numbers. If you have the ability to control it, we'll do that. There are other things such as identity of interest, which is family members and the same industry, i.e. hotels. But we only, even though you may have uncles and sons and daughters and nieces who own all this stuff, we only need to worry about the franchise agreement for the applicant borrowers. So that will help. Lance is correct. I assume that they will give us further guidance, but it is getting a little bit more simple. Anyway, that will be in the mail to you.
Well, I think SBA's intent is to simplify the franchise approval process, to simplify what affiliation, because Bob, I teach a lot of eligibility training, as you well know, and so do you. And you can set and explain affiliation to lenders throughout the country, and it's still, there's a lot of gray areas, and SBA is trying to simplify and clarify. Now, it's a moving target right now as they work through this, but I think by the end of the fiscal year, which is September 30, hopefully we'll have some good clarification.
We're all over this. Our job is to take difficult stuff and put it into context for you, and we will do that. We will do that. This came out yesterday, Lance. In fact, you are devising a new webinar on it, that all stimulus loans, the loans that were approved under the Small Business Jobs Act in 2010, must be corrected by August 30th, which is end of next month. And if you can't get it done, if you have a clerical error that has canceled the guarantee, you will no longer be able to reinstate it. Also, your balances must match. If the balances don't match, SBA is going to assume they're correct and you're wrong. And that could cause nightmares at guarantee purchase practice. It's going to cause nightmares on your parish review score. So this is extremely important to go through your portfolio, identify those stimulus loans, and make sure that the balances are correct and that the guarantee has not been canceled.
Absolutely. These stimulus loans, it's always been a challenge, Bob. When I was deputy director at the Little Rock Commercial Loan Servicing Center, they'd have a stimulus loan and somebody on the 1502 report would mark it paid in full, or there was a mistake made at some point. I think it's critical and we're going to cover this in a webinar to help people understand how to take care of it, but I think it's critical that you make sure all these are in place, because after August 30th, if for some reason that loan is not current in SBA system, it's gone. The SBA guarantee is gone.
You do not have an SBA loan. Lance and I will be developing a 20-point checklist that you need to do to help get this stuff done correctly. So we are on top of this. Finally, I know we're running a little bit long. We respect your time. Secondary market was up a little bit, 0.11%, pretty much across the board. Month-to-month change, they're down 0.3%. So that continues the trend of, yes, we expect to see these premiums to decrease through the end of the year, although we got a nice little bump last week.
Bob, I just did a 25-year prime plus 2 3/4 loan. It looks pretty nice.
Good.
116.
Yeah, 116. Even if we have to split the premium after 108, which is not yet in effect, but it may very well happen. And these are stats. I love stats. I think this is interesting stuff. This is a report by Bank of the West. It says 81 of Main Street is optimistic. What I always enjoy about these reports is when you ask the Main Street owner, how's the economy doing? And everyone, we don't like it. We're not optimistic. But how about you for your individual business? Oh, yeah, we're doing great. So I always like that. I think that's an interesting stat. 49% expect their profits and revenues to increase, about 50-50. So these are always interesting things. We're going to end with this question from Jessica. I'm sorry, Tracy. I cannot read today. This is an SBA 1 question, Lance. And thank you for the question, Tracy. We appreciate these. How do you put in quarterly payments of interest only? The homework, go ahead.
Yes, in the terms and conditions part of SBA 1, on the payments section, there's a drop-down box where you can click in terms and conditions on the initial page, there is a box where you put in you put the term of the loan, but you put in the number of months of interest-only payments. And on the next page in SBA 1, it's going to ask you some questions about those payments. And there's a drop-down box that would let you select. For instance, we have an interest-only payment where the payment is 12 months interest only. The payment's paid annually. So you can select annual, quarterly, monthly for those interest-only payments. Again, it's in that terms and conditions on the questions where they ask about the payments, and there is a drop-down box that will let you choose between monthly, quarterly, and annually interest-only payments. And again, on the first page of terms and conditions, you put in the maturity, but there's also a box that says interest-only period in months, and you put in 6 months there.
Lance, I'm looking at the roster. We got people from all over the country, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi. Thank you all for spending a little bit of time with us. Hopefully this is worth your time. I'm going to give a shout out to the following who have completed, what is this, guys, week 3 or week 4? They've completed week 4. They're halfway through the SBA 1 training. Alina, I may have mispronounced that. I apologize. Amanda, Kathy, Christy, Connie, Daniel, Debbie, Julie, Justin, Kalia, Kathy, Kim, Christina, Linda, Lisa, Lucy, Mike, Paula, and the aforementioned Tracy. So congratulations to all of you. The goal is to get the plaque, and I know we're going to have, Lance, you are almost done filming. I guess when you're out here, you're going to be finished. We will do a session
We're going
live.
to finish up the last 2 weeks.
Okay.
We're going to finish up the last 2 weeks when I come out. We're going to start work on the new Express certification series, and then we're going to do this new webinar.
Great. Well, very good. Well, thank you all very much. We're 5 minutes over, but we had a lot of news. Normally, we don't get a lot of news. Enjoy your weekend. We'll talk to you next week. Office hours next Thursday, 1 o'clock Eastern.